Thanks everybody for being here. As you mentioned, my name is Pete Benedetto. I'm with Endeavor Catalyst. We're a global organization supporting founders all over the world. We also have an investment fund called Catalyst, which is lucky to support many of these founders, including the gentleman sitting with me today. I was thinking about this on the way over. I'm really excited for this conversation. It's fun to work with guys like this because you get to do their bragging for them. He's too humble to tell you of many of their accomplishments and just how big of a deal they are. But the fact is that Runway is one of the top AI companies in the world today. They were recently named to the top 50 list. They compete head-to-head with OpenAI, with Google, and in many cases, they've actually beaten them in some of these head-to-head competitions. They are now valued at over $5 billion. That's public. They've raised nearly $1 billion from top-tier investors, including General Atlantic. Full disclosure, we are a small investor in the company. I'd say we're a small investor, huge supporter. So with no further ado, I'll kick things off, and I'll let you tell us more about the business itself. But Anastasis here, if you could just start off, for any non-Runway users in the room, and if we'll pause here if anybody wants to go ahead and download the app, it's well worth it. But for anybody who's not yet a user, please tell us a little bit about what the company does.
Yeah, so Runway is an applied research company. We focus a lot on models that understand, they generate, and interact with the real world. And that takes a lot of different shapes. The models that we're most well known for are video generation models. So models that are able to, you can describe anything, and then you can generate a video based on that description. At this point, we have 5 different generations of models that we've released, and we do everything from the research and development to build those models from scratch to actually deploying in various products in different industries, from the creative industry to all the way to robotics and gaming.
Awesome. And so we're going to get into the tech in a second here, but just take us back to, because I think you have a very non-traditional, quite an interesting origin story. He's actually a hometown guy. He's from Athens originally. But if you could tell us a little bit, you grew up here in Athens. You went to New York, studied both computer science and filmmaking in New York, and then you ended up building an AI company. But tell us a little bit about how that path happened.
Yeah, so it did not happen by design, let's put it that way. So I was always very interested in both art and technology, but pursuing them very separately for a long time. And I was interested in, especially as deep learning was starting to emerge, as machine learning was becoming really good at the middle of, let's say, the 2010s. I started experimenting a lot with what kind of tools and what kind of new kinds of creative applications can we find on top of those models. So it's been a long journey of, I think, the past more than 10 years of trying to figure out how do we build, how do we democratize creativity, how do we build new kinds of tools, and how can we use those models to actually advance human capabilities. But it's, I think we've reached to this point now where those models have become really quite good and quite useful, and we see them being production ready across many different industries.
Awesome. So for anybody who's starting out in the field of AI, if you're going to high school, you're going to university here, this is a path that you can follow. It's quite an inspiration. But to talk a little bit about the technology itself, so Runway started out and is widely known as a leader in AI for video generation. And again, anyone who hasn't tried it yet, it's super consumer friendly. I'm not a filmmaker myself. I've tried it. It's a lot of fun, super easy to use. So go for it. But just to catch people up, because for those of us not in the creative industries, basically tell us what is possible today with your technology that wasn't possible even a year ago or even 2 years ago. So what can they expect?
Yeah, so it's the progress on those models in the past 2 or 3 years has been pretty astonishing. We went from, when we started out Runway, you could generate very tiny images that looked, very low quality images, and we've gone then to this point right now where you can generate entire short films that are really indistinguishable. If in many cases people cannot tell apart that something is generated versus something is, is shot in the real world. So we've made quite large strides both in the kind of quality of those models, but also in how controllable they are. So in the ability to bring like your own specific character styles, environments into the generation process and really express exactly the story that you want to tell. So it's been, we currently Runway is being used by all the major studios, kind of most of the major advertising agencies, large tech companies, and they're using it across both on kind of filmmaking, but also in advertising and building entire campaigns from scratch. So the ability to essentially create an entire multi-shot video that maintains consistency of characters, of environments, and at the same time generate at scale. I think that has only really happened in the past 6 months.
Awesome. And so just to dig a little bit deeper, I think many of you may have caught the headline that Anthropic just raised an additional $65 billion at something close to $1 trillion valuation. And this is one of the LLMs, right? And I know they do more than that, but this is one of the LLM makers. But you guys are slightly different. And while we keep hearing in the world of tech that LLMs are just starting to scratch the surface of what's possible, right? We're just at the outset. That's why these valuations are there. The future is bright. There's going to be all kinds of applications. However, you've also talked about the fact that LLMs are limited in a way because they're based on text. So if you could tell us a little bit about, all these massive headlines, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of money flowing towards it, but what are the limitations there?
Yeah, so we take a bit of a contrarian view that large language models, despite all the amazing advancement has been happening in LLMs over the past few years, there is a ceiling to how far they can get because they're only trained on human observations of the world. They're trained on how, whether it's textbooks, message boards, kind of all of the internet. They're only trained on kind of the descriptions that people have about how the world works, the existing theories that people have about, about physics and biology and science. And so by nature of that, they're only going to be able to reason with this similar ways that humans reason about the world. But if you actually want to build systems that are able to solve all the kind of the biggest real world problems that we care about, you need systems that learn directly from observation. They learn directly, whether it's from video or from observational scientific data, and that's what we call world models, which are essentially, we see that as an extension and expansion of all the work that we've been doing on video models. A video model is trained on massive amounts of kind of demonstrations that maybe of humans performing different tasks, of physics and physical phenomena. And from that, it's able to essentially build a replica or a simulation of how the real world works. And once you have that, you can use that to make films, of course, but you can also use it in areas like robotics, because now that you have this very, fundamentally, what intelligence is the ability to predict what happens next. And if you're able to predict what's the consequence of an action that you take in the real world, then you can use those systems as a foundation for any system, any hardware, any system that basically interacts with the real world.
Awesome. So we've moved from filmmaking and the kind of the creative industries into now there's a huge application in robotics, and there's even more beyond that. But if you could kind of drill in on robotics specifically, because I think you have some clients in that space, as much as you're able to share, give us a little bit of an example of how exactly these robotics companies are using Runway as a technology.
Yeah, so the biggest bottleneck in robotics by far is data. It's collecting enough demonstrations of a robot performing a specific task. It's extremely time consuming, and companies are really bottlenecked by the amount of hardware that they have. And to scale that data collection process, it's obviously expensive because you need to buy more robots. Very often you really need to build this data flywheel where you deploy the robot in the real world and you use it to collect data. But the robot needs to be good enough to actually deploy. So there is that chicken and egg problem. So we see video models and world models as a solution to that data bottleneck. If you're able to generate videos and demonstrations of a robot performing a task, you're able to massively expand the amount of data that you train your robot on. So not just on the real world videos, but also on generated videos. and you're able to make the systems that you're building a lot more robust. If you're building, let's say, a self-driving car model, it's very difficult to collect enough data of examples of accidents happening. That's will be extremely expensive. You have to do that for obvious reasons. So being able to use a video model to essentially simulate all those long tail events is extremely beneficial from that regard. So we work a lot with robotics companies and physical AI companies on specifically that kind of data bottleneck, and in our video models being a foundation for the kinds of models that they're building on top of.
Awesome. So continuing on this thread, we've gone filmmaking, robotics. Let's talk a little bit about the potential of world models and their applications. So you've mentioned before that there's potential paths in anti-aging research as well as drug discovery. So to me, again, robotics to drug discovery, again, it seems like something quite a leap, quite different. Tell us how that's possible and what's needed to get there.
Yeah, and to be clear, like the way we operate at Runway is really figuring how to sequence the bets that we're taking. We have a very clear vision, ambitious vision around where those models can go, but we're really expanding kind of one step of the way. And the way we're thinking about those models in general is we think the advancement in AI will come from this idea of multimodality, of not just incorporating language, but also incorporating visual data, incorporating other modalities in the future. So for example, right now we're training models that can generate video, audio, and actions at the same, with one model. And if you expand this approach, you can really start to incorporate more and more kinds of modalities from whether it's from different levels of biology, whether it's from from physics, and you can build a single model that's able to understand the world from very different scales, from the microscopic scale to even we've done some work on astrophysics simulations as well, and adapting our video model for that. So those models are very general, and the things that you learn from one modality can actually transfer quite well in a lot of cases to other modalities as well.
Super interesting. Kind of staying on the potential of world models, you've said in some interviews before that we haven't even come close to a capability plateau, which is pretty mind-blowing when the technology seems to be moving at such a breakneck speed, and you're saying that plateau is nowhere in sight. And the reason you mentioned is that we've only trained on a fraction of the world's observational data, which is key to building world models. So these are things like scientific experiments, sensor data, and so on. Play this out as we collect more of that data. What does the world look like when we have far more of that data and we're able to build very robust world models? What's going to be possible?
Yeah, so if we think about what is the bottleneck of scientific progress, I think the language model labs have one answer, which is it's really the scientific progress is bottlenecked by the number of genius scientists that we have, and the more, if we can build those artificial scientists on top of LLM, they can reason through every single problem. They can develop hypotheses faster. They can develop kind of ideas of how to solve different problems faster. But in reality, a lot of the bottlenecks and the slowness of progress comes from running experiments. Like those artificial scientists will still need to run experiments in the real world, wait to collect results from that. So the way we see world models kind of eventually becoming is essentially becoming a platform for any kind of virtual experiment that you can run, and being able to massively kind of accelerate the time it takes to kind of understand what are the effects of different interventions. And so we see that as the path to significantly accelerating scientific progress.
Awesome. We're gonna shift a bit here to kind of the competitive landscape. I mentioned in the opener that these guys are going head to head with the Googles and the OpenAIs of the world, which is quite a task with all their resources, with all their the thousands of employees, all of the compute that they have. Kind of the odds or the competition is stacked against you, yet you guys are competing head to head with them and winning time and again. So as an Endeavor entrepreneur, an endeavor being built on the idea that great founders can win from anywhere without their traditional advantages. I wanted to understand, is this something that you feel, and does being an outsider, coming from outside of Silicon Valley, do you see that as an advantage, and if so, how?
I think there's advantages and disadvantages to it. Obviously, when we started out, we had no network, we could only raise our first rounds of financing just on the basis of the demos and the products that we had built. But the advantage has been that it really forced us to think of this idea of stepping stones. So we didn't have the luxury of spending 3 years just doing purely research without releasing anything in the world. We went into this habit very early on, where we decided we're just going to release something every week, and we're going to figure out at every level of capability of those models, even when those models were not obviously as powerful as they are today. They're still useful for some things, and we're going to figure out what are they useful for, what is the right audience for them, and we're going to try to scale the business together as we scale the research. And I think that built the right muscle in the team towards bias of action and towards being very pragmatic. And so while having this very high-level, ambitious vision on the research side, we still maintain this very down-to-earth approach towards how we grew the business, how we grew our customer base, and I think that was quite helpful to have early on.
Yeah, and maybe to pick up on that, he shared with me the other night that in an interview, despite being valued at $5 billion, you might think they've got a team of a couple thousand. In fact, they're about 160 employees today.
Yeah.
So it's a very elite team of doing an incredible amount of work. You guys are slowly building this team, and one of the keys that you mentioned has been the culture that you've built. Could you talk a little bit about that culture, what it is, and how you aim to preserve it as you grow?
Yeah, so I would say the only real moat in AI right now is the team and the culture that you build in your company. Model moat is very short-lived, data moats are very short-lived. You might release a model and it's the top model in the industry, and then a few months later, that's no longer the case. And so maintaining that culture of constantly being able to innovate and constantly being able to maintain the momentum in the team, I would say that's the most important thing for us. And as we're scaling the company, maintaining that culture is very important, and making sure that we had one of the luxuries we had was that we started very early on. We started when nobody really cared about generative AI, and it was something that we built this small group of people that were just very passionate about this niche topic, and that allowed us to really spend our time to build out the culture of the team and figure out the ways of working before after 2022 the field completely changed. But we had built this very strong identity as a company, and this very deep collaboration between the creative side of the company and the engineering and research side of the company.
Very cool. And he told me that they recently had a hire of theirs who was offered twice the salary and a massive signing bonus and chose to actually join the team at Runway. So the proof is in the pudding. If you're a talented developer, you're interested in Runway, definitely apply for their open positions. We've got time for maybe one last closing question. So this is a big one, but we're in Athens. We're in the home of philosophy, the home of Socrates, the home of asking big, thoughtful, tough questions and challenging oneself. So the world, I think, we know, we read the headlines, we barely understand some parts of technological development. Things are happening super rapidly, and it feels like an age of possibility. So how do you think about yourself in this future, where things are going, and what do you consider others to consider for themselves?
Yeah, so I think one aspect, one mindset shift that I think is really important is, I think especially in the age of AI, we think a lot about building technologies that can achieve parity with humans on a specific task, on a specific benchmark. But ultimately, technology and humanity evolve together, one with each other, and we should always have the mindset of what are the ways in which technology can really enhance and bring and change the kinds of activities that humans do, empower them to do things that were not possible before. And I think that can often get lost in like how we describe the progress of AI, where a lot of it has been focused on achieving parity with like what humans do. I know that's something we've always felt very strongly. It's not the right perspective to have as you're thinking about the evolution of this technology. And even if you think in like specifically in art, where we spend a lot of time thinking about the history of art and like where does generative AI fit in this overall trajectory of like human culture and art. Like new forms of art that are enabled by technology almost never just purely mimic the old forms of art. Like photography started as mimicking painting, but became an entirely new medium. And that's the same that happens with every technology. It really allows us. It changes human nature. It changes the kinds of things that we do. And I think that's often something that's underlooked, but the right perspective to have as you think of like what is possible with this technology and the kinds of things, rather than like cost savings or like those kinds of narratives. What is the things that like humans can do now that they could not do before? How does human society and human culture change as a result of those technologies?
Awesome. All right, we'll have to pick that up over drinks someday. I want you all to join me. Endeavor, as a global organization, we believe that ecosystems, entrepreneurial ecosystems, are built by high-impact entrepreneurs. Those are entrepreneurs who scale up, inspire others, and pay it forward to the next generation. I think Anastasis is an incredible example of a high-impact entrepreneur. If you'd all join me in thanking him for his time today.